the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
These words helped President Johnson win the 1964 election against his bellicose Republican opponent, Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater. The stakes of an American election are still about who has authority to launch nuclear weapons. But the artistry of political communication is not what it used to be, despite its technological sophistication. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis found that out the hard way on Twitter when a live, voice-only broadcast announcing his run for the Republican presidential nomination ran into technical difficulties.
Are you there? Can you hear us? I think you broke.
I'm here.
I know. I think you broke the internet.
In the end, DeSantis was able to make his appeal to several 100,000 accounts that tuned in.
We must end the culture of losing that has infected the Republican Party in recent years. The tired dogmas of the past are inadequate for a vibrant future. We must look forward, not backwards.
DeSantis' pitch to Republican voters is that he's more electable than former President Donald Trump. Trump took the technical difficulties as a chance to embarrass his rival, posting this on his own social media site called Truth Social.
We are kind of melting the servers.
Since he purchased Twitter last year for $44 billion, Musk has been trying to reinvent the site so it appeals more to conservative customers. But Musk's praise of DeSantis might make it less likely Trump will return to Twitter.
They're great players and they're very good. I find them to be very good.
Musk might even alienate Trump loyalists and stoke Tesla investors' fears that he's too invested in politics to manage the electric car company. Musk is not alone in trying to profit from the process of an American presidential election. The race is on now, not just for the White House, but for tech and media companies to make themselves indispensable to politicians and voters alike, while moderating speech in a way that keeps both happy. The future of social media, in America and the rest of the world, will be shaped by who comes out the winner. Wilson Dysart, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with political economist Lizzie Galbraith. She joins us now from Edinburgh, Scotland. Really good to have you with us, Lizzie. Regardless of who becomes the Republican presidential nominee, how might a Republican administration steer the US economy?
So one of the big areas that we would be expecting to see some change is around tax policy. One of the big things that's going to be happening after the 2024 election is that at the end of 2025, the tax cuts that were introduced by President Trump expire. Now, they can be renewed. And in particular, the income tax cuts that President Trump introduced will need to either be renewed by Congress or will be allowed to expire. This doesn't apply to the corporation tax cut, that's permanent. However, this is one of the big decisions that the next president is going to need to make, whether or not to keep going with the tax policy that President Trump introduced, or whether or to go down a different track. And under a Republican president, we would expect that it's more likely than not that they will attempt to keep those tax cuts in place. The other thing to note here is that this will be subject to congressional approval. So one thing that we will also be watching for, in addition to the actual outcome of the presidential election, is which party controls Congress after 2024 as well. It will be much harder for a Republican president to keep those tax cuts in place if you had the Democrats controlling one or both chambers of Congress as well. And the other area that you would expect to see some shift as well is around trade policy. President Trump in particular is advocating for a return to his previous trade policies on China. So we would expect more of a focus on trade balances, more of a return to that tariff-based trade policy that we saw under him previously as well.
We know the US is currently facing the very real possibility of defaulting on its debt as Republican and Democratic lawmakers remain deeply divided about raising the debt ceiling. It's just another sign of just how polarized politics is in the US right now. Do you see a scenario in which that polarization perhaps eases or gets better, or do you think it'll only get worse at this point?
Yeah, so our base case for this debt ceiling is that we do see a resolution, although it may be that we need to have a short-term extension or suspension of the debt ceiling to actually allow for that to take place. But you're right in that political polarization in the US is increasing, and that's meaning that we're getting more situations like this very contentious raising of the debt ceiling more often than we have previously. And political polarization in the US is worsening. The other factor that's compounding that is you're also seeing much smaller difficulties, much smaller majorities in Congress as well. So at a time where bipartisan policy making is harder because politicians are further apart, you're also seeing smaller majorities that make that even more difficult. And that's going to be a feature of American politics going forward that is going to make the debt ceiling in particular a greater risk, particularly when there are Democrat presidents dealing with Republican controlled Congress.